Two stoic, intense athletes. And thematically, this has become a thing in this series.
UFC 303 has came and went. Obviously, originally supposed to be the return of the notorious Conor McGregor. We already have talked about that enough, I think. We all know, hurt his toe, had to pull out. UFC puts Alex Pereira and Yuri Prochazka rematch in the new main event. So we're not going to spend too much time talking about what could have been with Conor McGregor, because I think that the card that we ended up getting was more than enough to replace it. So if it's okay with you, I say we just hop right into the main event. And for those who didn't see it, Alex Pereira defeats Yuri Prochazka again by knockout in this basically the very beginning of the second round. And it was I definitely think it was caused a little bit by that knockdown at the end of the first round, that nasty left hook that Pereira has. Hit Yuri with it at the buzzer. Not the buzzer, this is an NBA game. You wish we were talking about the NBA with the Celtics, but no. But Pereira knocked down Yuri at the end of the round, and basically Yuri was kind of stumbling to the stool already, and then obviously he throws that lead leg high kick out of nowhere and just starched Yuri with it, and that was a wrap. And before we really get into it, I just wanted to say this, because in the first round, Pereira was landing so much and so accurately. He wasn't throwing many shots that he wasn't connecting with. He landed at a 72% clip in that first round, which is crazy. You don't really see accuracy like that in the UFC. I mean, really in any promotion in MMA, because I would say you usually get an average of 50 to 60. So anything over 70 is just insane. And this is just insane what we're getting right now with Alex Pereira. What did you think of this insane run that he's been on? I know I keep saying that word, but there's really just nothing else that describes it. I mean, it's been unreal.
Yeah, so I think you factor in just obviously a shortened training camp for one, and I don't know, I won't even mention the weight cut, because at this point this kind of weight cut for Pereira is light work for him, which is super impressive in and of itself. But coming in, I think the further we're gonna get in the Alex Pereira's career, the question's gonna rise, how much are his opponents really going to look to stand with him and try to not try to outstrike him, but at least in this case, not try to get hit as much as, let's say, Yuri did in that first round. Obviously at such an efficient, accurate pace that Alex was landing at. But in this case, just another guy with because we kind of we touch on it before, and I think just the fan base in general is starting to see with Yuri how maybe the whole fight IQ thing, in terms of maybe kind of leaving the chin out and just willing to take those shots and whatnot, because he is able to take it and give it back, but
no one's taking those shots against Pereira, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yuri loves Yuri loves to come forward and stuff, but I think it's confirmed now, this all-time pace that Pereira is on. It just, guys are really gonna be hard pressed for this point forward to just want to stand with him and see if they can hang with him on the feet, because it's gotten to the point where really nobody can. And so I think guys are really gonna just look to see where they can make him uncomfortable on the ground, and obviously you have to get him there first. But when that right there is a mission in of itself, because you're gonna have to back him up, I would assume, up against the cage, try to get him to circle and stuff a little bit more. And obviously Alex Pereira is so good at taking center stage and just throwing and landing whatever he wants, pretty much. So in this case, he didn't even really need to show that hook up until the end of the round, he was kind of just chewing up Yuri with the leg kicks and stuff, and
kind of like the first fight.
Yeah, exactly. Like kind of, and once again coming in with a shortened training camp too, like probably implementing. I did hear Polino Cruz, though, his head coach, kind of say right before the fight the night of, like they implemented that it's like they saw something in Yuri's game and they wanted to implement that head kick.
I think they said that was in the locker room. They saw him warming up on Instagram, I believe, which is like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
First of all.
Yeah,
but.
It was like they had him exactly where he wanted him, obviously rattling him at the end of that first round. And then once you saw, obviously, Yuri's hands down and stuff, Alex he threw it with complete perfection. Yuri even tried to catch it, and it's just like, no, that's not happening whatsoever.
Those shamanic powers are no joke. But I mean,
the black magic.
If we're being serious though, like Alex Pereira, you mentioned the run that he's been on, 8-1 in the UFC, and he only debuted 2.5 years ago. Already been champion in 2 divisions. People are already talking about a third. Dana White was saying how Joe Rogan's been in his ear basically all week, saying like, "Come on, we got to get this guy up to heavyweight now too," which is just insane to think about.
That is crazy to me because it really hasn't been that long either way. At least, even just speaking as a light heavyweight to this point, like it hasn't been long whatsoever. Like I would think there are, like a Ankalaev, for instance, at this point, who I think, is probably the clear-cut number 1 contender now. But, yeah, dude, it's like at this point we're already talking about him going up another weight class and fighting John Jones, for instance. Like, man, that's a really kind of crazy pace to even think about. So
that's what I'm saying. Like, 'cause I agree with you. I think Ankalaev, it should be and will be next. I mean, Dana White even said as much. But just the fact that he has only been in the UFC since 2021 and we're already talking about fighting John Jones in a heavyweight super fight, it's just unreal. Like I've been saying this, I think he's truly a special champion and a special athlete, and he's arguably the biggest star in the UFC right now. Maybe an active Conor McGregor could be the only thing that would compete against that, but Conor's obviously not really fighting right now. And for a guy like Alex Pereira to have 9 fights in 2.5 years and to already have done this much, like I said, 2 different titles in 2 different divisions, and maybe a third in the future, it's wild to think about the pace that he's on, and the fact that it was all caused by Israel Adesanya saying one sentence in an interview. Isn't that crazy how much that's altered the timeline? Just insane.
Yeah, you've been seeing that clip surface obviously a lot more now. But just to touch on like the fight itself and Pereira's performance again. Once again, it's great to think about what the guy is even able to do with a shortened training camp, knowing he's got to defend his title against someone he's already beaten, and for him to still make quick work of Yuri like that. It once again, like I kind of was saying, talking about the fight itself, like I think guys are gonna really think to because obviously someone like Yuri's he's capable of standing like that and holding his own with even someone like Alex Pereira, but it doesn't matter if you're not better than the guy. So you gotta come in with with that game plan and just obviously a lot easier said than done, but you gotta try and make someone like that back up a little bit, a little more uncomfortable, and shoot for those takedowns and stuff, because no one's hanging with Alex Pereira on the feet at all. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, you'd have to hope for a lucky shot, I think, at this point. And the thing that worries me about his future opponents is Magomed Ankalaev said, "Oh yeah, I'm not going to take him down. I'm going to beat him on the feet." I'm like, okay, man, good luck with that. And if he does, shout out to him, because that is clearly not an easy feat. The only person who has done that in the UFC is Israel Adesanya, who is arguably the best striker in MMA history in terms of achievement. Pereira might even be coming for that title soon enough, but it's just nuts, man.
The irony too is because we're gonna talk about it with another fight on this card about guys just simply doing whatever they have to do just to get their hand raised, pretty much. So the first fighter people are going to think of in that instance is Bilal Muhammad. So, like I said, with this card, another fight in particular, we'll get to Ian Garry and MVP. But, yeah, like in this case, it's kind of the point where Alex Pereira he outclasses just about everybody on the feet. And there's nothing you can really do about it. And that's what that is. So, it's another all-time performance from a guy on a crazy pace and the current light heavyweight champion. So
things like this are why the fans love him. He doesn't just come there to win, like you said. He comes in to knock people out and to put on a show, and he has that element to him, like that. He doesn't talk much, but just like you hear people talk about aura a lot nowadays, but you joke around about it, but he kind of does have that. When he walks in and he does the whole thing with the bow and arrow, like. He's a fan favorite, that's for sure, and I think that the UFC is finally starting to understand just what they have in Alex Pereira, because we talk about, the last pay-per-view, UFC 302, and we were in Newark. Everywhere where Pereira was, the fans would just go crazy, and that says a lot, and I think the UFC is noticing that, and they're taking advantage of it, and, he just saved the card that the biggest star in Conor McGregor was supposed to be on, and he stole the show. And now he's headlined this card. He headlined UFC 300. He had crazy finishes on both. I think the fans are going to keep getting behind him if he keeps winning at this rate, the way that he is. So, but speaking of fan favorites, to move on to the co-main event, this card was just unbelievable, man, because Diego Lopes, fan favorite, that's for sure. And I think his new opponent, Dan Ige, became a fan favorite. If he wasn't already. I think the hardcores already knew, but, the casual audience, a guy stepping up on a couple hours' notice is just the most badass thing you could do. So for those who didn't see, Brian Ortega, he had to pull out of the fight on the night with a fever, and Diego Lopes was like, I still want to fight. I don't care who it's against, what weight. Dan Ige stepped up. Literally, I think it was 2.5 hours before the pay-per-view started. They weighed in at 160-something pounds. The catch weight was 165. And, before we get into the fight, I think it's just, I'm sure you agree, both of those guys deserve so much credit because, on the one hand, Dan Ige stepping up like that, no fear, and Diego Lopes just for rolling with the punches and still wanting to put on a show for the fans.
Yeah, so Diego Lopes, Diego Lopes had to make weight for another division with obviously the scheduled fight with Brian Ortega, and then he finds out that Dan Ige is going to step in, and so if I'm not mistaken, Diego Lopes has to step on the scale again after
fight night.
Yep. So after he because it's usually water weight and stuff that they're cutting off, so I guess he rehydrates and gets that weight back and stuff after the weigh-in. So
I think he weighed in at 161.
161
so
for him.
Basically like 6 more pounds.
That he got up to, yep. And then so Dan Ige is coming in at the weight he just walks around at. And dude, just to put that in respectfully, this guy woke up on Saturday morning having no idea he was going to be fighting.
Right.
And then just literally mere hours before the co-main event, because he's the one that wanted, he sees that Brian Ortega pulls out, Hunter Campbell, they're probably scrambling for that replacement and stuff. Like, obviously, like, we really don't want to have to scrap the co-main entirely, but Danny is the one who steps up, and he's the one who he wanted the opportunity. Like, he hit up Hunter Campbell pretty much, like, he was, I guess he was around, he was available, and he's like, just don't take this opportunity away from me and stuff. And like, he was game. Like, yeah, you kind of said it yourself. Like, a lot of guys will talk about like anytime, anywhere, anyone, but you seriously just got that.
I mean, Dan Ige put it on the line, dude.
Yeah, you just got the reality version of that with Dan Ige and even Diego Lopes too. Because I mean, even for Diego Lopes, like that, just even the whole lead up to the fight week itself had to be like rather, just, I would think like stressful and stuff. But like for both of those guys to still be up for the challenge and step in there, wow, it's that's the kind of stuff like legends are made of, it pretty much. So That was insane. That when I honestly found that out, that because he's just coming into the arena, is like, oh, here we go, like, and it's not Diego Lopes obviously knows, so like Diego Lopes is really on his way up to trying to build up his name and stuff.
Things
even
like
more.
this will help.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
So man, I couldn't. Yeah, that's crazy to think that the fight actually went on, and both of those guys made it through the entire fight.
I mean, I remember, I think it was UFC 248, somewhere around there. I thought it was the craziest thing ever that James Krause stepped up on 24 hours notice for a fight.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
that.
Exactly, right? Like Dan Ige just steps up now on 2 hours notice, which I'm not sure if that could ever be beaten unless they just take someone out of the crowd in the UFC. Just unreal circumstances. Again, just shout out to both of those guys. But let's talk about the fight too now, because there was a fight at the end of all this, thankfully. That's the whole reason why we're having the conversation, right? So the fight itself, Diego Lopes wins via unanimous decision. Pretty clear, 29-28. Lopes won the first 2 rounds using just his insane grappling. And honestly, on the feet, he looked pretty good too. And then in the last round, it seemed like he gassed out a little bit. You wonder if that has to do with how the weight was fluctuating. But yeah, just a clear 29-28.
That's the tough one, because you want to talk about obviously Diego Lopes as the winner and stuff, and just continuing obviously with all that adversity and stuff he had to weather. But I would say it's even fair to say too, I don't think we outside of what we just talked about, like obviously the guy is he's serious about his path on towards the top and will fight anybody anywhere anytime. After the fight itself, I think I kind of came away with what I already knew about Diego Lopes, obviously as an insane grappler, and I guess just more judging off his last fight with someone like Sadiq Youssef across from him, and that striking challenge that presented, that's kind of what I was more focused towards and stuff. Like with this fight, for instance, but obviously with how much it changed, it was tough. But
I mean, I think he did good on the feet though, against a guy like Danny.
But it's probably we just didn't get the biggest, still the biggest sample of it. I would say,
to me, it seemed like Dan Ige was kind of sitting back and not hoping, but waiting for him to leave an opening to hit him with that knockout shot, because Diego, he hits with a lot of power and he's pretty quick, but he keeps his hands down.
I thought Dan Ige did a good job of keeping the range and flicking that jab and whatnot, and kind of not letting Diego Lopes come in for that knockout shot. But I think still once again I think kind of just came away from this fight knowing what I already knew about Diego Lopes in the cage, and it's just once again obviously this fight Diego Lopes wasn't supposed to fight on his card at all, but then once you see that he's gonna get that, like I mentioned on the last pod talking about this fight, how this was probably a dream fight for him of sorts against someone like Brian Ortega, and for that to get scrapped last minute, it is kind of hard to get that gauge going forward and stuff. Obviously at a catchweight bout nonetheless, but this is still a guy that I think is still gonna stay super active, and the UFC is still gonna look to still push, and I think still wanna obviously they were gonna give him another insane grappler with Brian Ortega, but I think going forward maybe they will continue to try and find those really high-end strikers to line up across from him, and then
featherweight ain't lacking any of them.
That's
for sure. But I mean, Diego Lopes, really good win, just off the circumstances. I think you still have those question marks, but again, it's kind of just out of his control. There's nothing he could do. All he could do is go in there and fight who they put in front of him, and he did that. He won. So I think Dan Ige, like I said, respect to him too. It seemed like his game plan was to kind of wait for that to get that big shot against Lopes coming in. Didn't happen, but he won a round, which is amazing considering, like you said, he woke up that morning not thinking he was going to be fighting at UFC 303. So, yeah, just shout out to both of those guys. And they had so much respect, too, after the fact. And something like this is, I think it's something that links you for life almost. The fact that they came in there and saved that fight like the way that they did. So, great work by both of those guys. To go on to the next few fights, though, I think these next two are probably going to have like a shorter conversation. To start off with Roman Dolidze and Anthony Smith. Not really too much to say about this one. Dolidze dominated the fight, which is impressive, actually, considering this was his first fight at 205 and against the number 10 guy in the world.
Yeah.
30-27, 229-28. He looked good all around, but nothing special. There was no intensity in this fight. You know what I mean? It was just kind of, okay, Dolidze won. I think it's intriguing if he decides to stay at light heavyweight now that he just beat Anthony Smith. But I don't know. There's not really too much that I have to say. I just think Dolidze landed some big shots. He did well when he had Smith on the ground too. Just honestly looked better than I expected him to look. So good win by him. That's really all I got.
Yeah, maybe Dolidze does choose to stay around, honestly, at 205. Because you gotta think that obviously this is another guy stepping in on short notice and fighting at a different division, and yeah, like you just mentioned, he's fighting a top 10 guy. So, I guess
it has to help his confidence.
So they were former training partners.
Yeah, I think they've trained together in the past, like a decent amount. So I don't know if they're good buddies, but they're definitely on good terms.
Because if we're being honest, that. You could say even most of the fight came off as a glorified sparring match, to be honest. So it's kind of like that, I guess that sense of I guess there's a difference between two guys trying to feel each other out and stuff, and then, obviously the deeper you get into the fight, there's really no openings for either of them to get the finish. So, kind of seemed, I guess, more on Anthony Smith's part, trying to just point fight, obviously, and make sure he gets the win regardless, no matter what it takes. And it's just simply there just wasn't enough damage done at all on Anthony Smith's part, and so Roman Dolidze had a more well-rounded performance, and that's all it took. So
I just think Dolidze was a step ahead everywhere, to be honest. That's all it really came down to in this fight, and I think that the scorecards were pretty reflective of that, to be honest. But it was nothing special, sad to say. But to move on to the next fight, Macy Chiasson versus Mayra Bueno Silva, that one was definitely a better fight for as long as it lasted. Yeah. It just stinks that this one was an anticlimactic ending, considering the war that we were kind of getting ready for. Because I'll be honest, before this fight, I wasn't expecting a super exciting one, especially from Bueno Silva coming off that title fight loss. And that she didn't really look good in that fight. And Chiasson, she's known for kind of staying on the outside, point fighting. So I was like, all right, well, I don't really expect too much. And then Bueno Silva was landing some huge shots in the first round. And then in the second round, it basically, the script kind of flipped a little bit. And Chiasson obviously did some real damage to Bueno Silva's forehead. That cut above her eye, apparently the doctor said it was down to the bone. So I do understand them wanting to stop it. Obviously, I know Bueno Silva wanted to keep fighting, but I don't know. I'm kind of happy that the doctor kind of saved them from themselves at times. I think that that's important. Safety first. We don't want to see any gruesome shit happen. We're organized violence. Is what I'm saying. But,
that was a gnarly cut. It was indicative of the way the fight was going. So obviously, you wish you could have saw at least, I would say, all 3 rounds and see who got their hand raised at the end that way. But
I know, I'm so mad. This was such a good fight.
For Mayra Bueno Silva to want to keep fighting after that, man, I would say that says a lot about her in a way. And just knowing that it is the main card of a pay-per-view, wanted to
main card Mayra.
Try to take advantage of that opportunity as much as possible. But it was there'll still be fans that are oh, she wants to keep fighting, you gotta let her fight. But Yeah, like you said, you gotta protect the fighter from themselves sometimes. So
Yeah, I like the way that the ref handled it. I want to say it was Chris Taglioni, so apologies if it's not, because the doctor, you could tell the doctor didn't want to stop it and be the guy who says, "Look, this can't continue."
well, yeah, that's
so,
the weird. I mean,
but
that's the weird thing.
Before you say this, though, like Taglioni, I did like this because he didn't let the doctor kind of like go half-ass or sit on the fence. He was like, should she continue? He goes, well, that cut's pretty deep, and he was kind of just like, no, and he goes, can she continue? No, she probably shouldn't. Okay, that's it. Like, I don't know. You see a lot of times that some refs, they kind of don't make it like as assertive as it needs to be. I like that he kind of asked the doctor straight up, like, look, don't try and be like the guy who saves this fight. Like, should this go on? And when he said no hesitation from Taglioni's part. So you don't usually see that.
No,
much.
Yeah, that was pretty similar, I guess, to what I was gonna say, anyways. I mean, yeah, it was like the doctor kind of even. It was like the doctor didn't know. Like, it kind of was like hadn't not sure that, like, hey, you're the one that has the power to stop the fight. So, like,
you think he was in the cage thinking to himself, like in his head, like the inner monologue, like, I don't want to stop this fight and get a bunch of beers thrown at me. He's just like, no, I don't blame him.
I don't blame him in that case. Yeah, like I said, because fans will see that the fighter wants to keep fighting, so the fans are gonna be like, boo anyways, and let her keep fighting. But yeah, like that was it doesn't take a genius to understand that was a super serious cut. So
yeah, it was gruesome. There's blood everywhere, man. That was a rough one. But Macy Chiasson, she gets the win.
I think it was when she climbed out of the cage to talk to Dana. She's just got all the blood dripping, and
Dana's probably like, kid, get away from me.
Ari Emanuel's trying to back up. He's like, whoa! It's like, don't get the blood all over his nice designer pants.
You're getting blood all over the table. Stop. I imagine old school Dana, like the one that you see yelling at guys on the Ultimate Fighter back in the day. I just imagine that, kid, you're covered in blood. Get away from it.
Get away.
No, but that was. It says a lot about her spirit. You're right that she wanted to continue in that fight, but ultimately, I think the right decision was made. Chiasson gets a win. Technically, right now she's in the top 3 at women's bantamweight, so hopefully she'll get a nice big fight lined up for her next time out. But to talk about the opening fight on the main card, and this one I think will be a bigger conversation than the other 2 fights. Ian Garry moves to 15-0 after a unanimous decision win, 329-28 over Michael Venom Page. And, I mean, there's a lot of different places where you could start with this one. I do want to say this, though. People were kind of, crapping on the win, and I do understand it because it wasn't, the most entertaining fight. But for Ian Garry to, showcase a part of his game that we're not used to seeing, and I know Michael Venom Page is very much not known for his grappling, but there's certain things that Ian Garry was doing in there that was impressive to me, especially in round 1. I don't know if you remember that back take that he had. It was, kind of up against the cage, and then MVP kind of tried to, basically put his back up against the cage so Ian Garry couldn't, squeeze in there, and he still managed to, finagle his way, and then ended up in the body triangle, or had the body triangle on Michael Venom Page, so that was interesting. But I don't know if much was proved in this fight because MVP, we know he's not a good grappler, that's the thing, and on the feet MVP was doing pretty well against Ian Garry, for being honest.
Yeah, and I say no, obviously not to hate on Ian Garry, but it was
I don't think anybody would hate you if you did, though.
Yeah, no,
I don't think MMA fans would care if you were at this point, but yeah.
No, yeah, but I won't even take the cop out route like that. It's just kind of just. Yeah, That's how he fights his wife's nutritionist. No, we won't do that to him. I promise. Yeah, we came away knowing what we already knew, and I don't know if this is a case of because Ian Garry's actually fighting down after saying he won't fight down, but it was a case of just he's got the grappling prowess. He's and then for a welterweight, anyways, Ian Garry is a long guy. He's got the reach and stuff to him, and that's kind of my thing, I guess. Sure, obviously, it's not like we were proving that the striking is super polished and stuff yet to this point, but that's kind of like what we're trying to see more of from Ian Garry as he keeps moving up the rankings. Like, is he able to, actually throw those strikes with efficiency and land with power and stuff? And we just still don't really know yet, to be honest.
Yeah. Because you can't, like, this is the thing with MMA fans hating on Ian. They're like, oh, well, he, like, did so bad on the feet in that fight. And, like, he did, but to act like MVP isn't one of the best strikers in the division is insane. Like, so Ian Garry getting outstruck by MVP is not as crazy as people want to make it out to be. He's not overhyped. Like, MVP would do that to a lot of people on the feet. And some of the better fighters in that division, he would do that too. But it's just, all that really happened in this fight was that MVP couldn't keep it on the feet. And I think if he could have, he maybe would have won. But, you know,
so that's
mixed martial arts at the end of the day.
The thing with that, for Ian Garry to obviously want that, that step up in that fight with someone like Colby Covington, and obviously I think a fight with those two would, obviously I think bring out just a nice pace between, because we know how, that Colby can obviously go on for days with his cardio, and it would just obviously probably, really show the all-around game of Ian Garry, just even as a grappler in that sense. Now we've got him calling out Shavkat, and that like obviously I think that's definitely what we can kind of expect from. Respect for Ian Garry's, like, he does want those big tough fights that obviously not everybody's gonna be willing to take, but like in this case with Shavkat, for instance, I think that's a fight that's obviously, I think, would really like push a pace. And I know Ian Garry is obviously a more methodical fighter, and he likes to. I would say his game plan is he wants to pick guys apart through 3 rounds, but it doesn't always go that way. Like, he even said himself, like, he wanted the first round submission, but he didn't get it. So, was a fight with Shavkat, I think, would still, I get that would be, because
I think it's a good matchup. To be honest,
think about it too. Like, could that, let's say that could be maybe like a main event of a fight night card, and then that would be 5. Would that be 5 rounds?
A special certain fight night card at the UFC. UFC Vegas 100.
Yeah, dude, there you go. Because I think that's.
I'd love for them to listen to. I know we've said this a million times. People are probably gonna hate us that we keep saying it. Like, all right, we get it, UFC Vegas 100, but hey.
Yeah, no, the card's coming together in our heads, people. So so you got to bear with us. But no, I think that's. I don't think UFC is honestly gonna want to book Ian Garry for 5 rounds just yet. But so I'll say through 3 rounds.
Put the co-main for the original. No, I think you got 2 awesome prospects at welterweight. Honestly, they're contenders at this point. I think it's unfair to keep calling them prospects, especially considering some of the people they've beaten already.
Yeah.
So 2 guys, both undefeated. I would love to see it. Whether it's 3 rounds, 5 rounds, I couldn't care less. I just think the fact that Ian is calling these guys out says a lot.
Shavkat was not holding, Shavkat saw the call out and he was not holding it back. He's like, maybe Ian's forgotten about what's happened in these training sessions of ours.
Yeah, so, I don't factor that in though, to be honest. Like, that's just mind games in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you're trying to hype up the fight too. You wonder who's telling the truth.
Yeah, I think for us fans, it does get us excited to see who's really gonna back up that talk more in an actual fight. So I think kind of what I'm saying is more maybe on Shavkat's side. Shavkat is gonna push that. Obviously, someone who finishes at the rate, people at the rate that Shavkat does.
AK 100%.
Yeah, AK everybody.
Not forget that.
Yeah. I think he's really gonna push that pace from Ian Garry, and so Ian Garry, he probably maybe he's going to be more inclined to back up and stuff, and maybe even counterpunch in that sense, and we'll see.
Pop the jab. Yeah. Sean reminded me of that yesterday. Well, I'll talk about that at the end, but yeah, that was it's definitely a fight that I think is worth
I'm
exploring.
intrigued. Yeah, I'm intrigued. So
yeah, well, let's move on to the prelims. Talk about not popping the jab and pulling out. Joe Pyfer, I mean, he didn't really need to even do that. Just the boxing combinations to end this fight. Yeah, dude. First round knockout, coming back from his first UFC loss, which was a main event versus Jack Hermanson. I thought Joe Pyfer came back real strong. He was getting so much hate after that loss, and I don't understand why people don't like him that much. Like, maybe I don't know if I'm a little biased because obviously, like, we're from Jersey and he's like a Philly guy, so it's kind of like that Northeast type of mentality. But I don't know. I think that he proved himself in this fight, and people who were kind of counting him out after one loss, I think that's a bit misguided. And in this fight, knocking out Marc-Andre Barriault, who has a granite chin, I think that was super impressive. What was your thought on this one?
I mean, I didn't realize how much hate he was getting after his last fight, but
I wouldn't say hate, because I think what Ian Garry gets is hate.
Yeah.
But people with Joe Pyfer, I think they were more so saying like, oh, the hype train got beat. Now he's, you know how it is with MMA fans.
Yeah, and so those people are now back on the hype train, I would say.
I'd hope so.
After a finish like that, so
he's a force at 185, and just his power, I think, is a game changer. And he has good boxing as it is, but just the fact that he has that snap on his punches is just so impressive. But
I think for I think for a division like middleweight too, where you'll see the top guys, they're, I think, a lot more technical and stuff, whereas Pyfer obviously does have that one punch power. So the more you see him ascend in the division, it's going to be interesting to see. The further these fights get and the better the competition gets. Like,
I thought his call out was smart with Paul Craig. Did you see what he said today on the MMA Hour? By the way,
no, I didn't.
Well, he called Paul Craig out in the cage, but then I don't know what the question was. I just saw like part of his answer. He was saying how he doesn't respect how Paul Craig fights because he says he gets hit and then he ass scooches to the opponent. I should honestly find the exact quote.
Fights off his back and wants to pull you into his guard.
Dude, like I think it's a smart call out because Joe Pyfer, we mentioned that power. Paul Craig already gets hit enough on the feet. I think if he gets hit once by Joe Pyfer, that would be pretty much a wrap. And that's not disrespect towards Paul Craig. I would say that about most middleweights in the division. I mean, like I said, Barriault, he has a granite chin, and Pyfer made that one look easy. So he's something else, man. He has truly special knockout power at that division, and I can't wait to see him continue to move up because I think he will. But to move on to another prelim, the prelims on this card, by the way, were just insane.
I think, honestly, the prelims should get a lot of credit for this card as well. But obviously the main card, for how much it got shuffled, we usually just talk about the main, for these pay-per-view recaps, we'll talk about like the main card, maybe like showcase 1 to 2 prelims real quick. Yeah, these are really good prelims, Yeah, but like I said, to keep it moving, Andre Fili defeats Cub Swanson by split decision. Touchy-feely. That's one of my favorite nicknames in the sport. I do have to say that. But he defeats Cub by split decision, 229-28, and then 129-28 for Cub. Back and forth, man. I didn't think that this one was a robbery. I thought it was very, very close. But I personally gave it to Cub. I can't really say anyone's wrong for picking it the other way. It's just a matter of what you're giving people credit for, because Fili, there were points where he had him held up against the cage or he took him down, but Cub Swanson, the thing is, he was getting up really quick, and when the fight was in open space, they were really just trading shots for the most part. It was pretty even when it comes to the stand-up. So I guess if you want to use that grappling by Fili to be the difference maker, I guess I would understand that. But the way I feel is what difference did it really make? Because there was no point in there where Cub was really getting dominated. I mean, maybe besides up against the cage at times, but I don't know. I thought it was a close fight, so that's all I'm gonna say. I like both of these guys, always have. I mean, 2 UFC veterans who've given us a lot of fun fights, and they both just came in there and gave us another. I mean, Cub Swanson, legend of the game, and that word is used loosely at times, but Cub has given us some legendary fights. I mean, that fight with Doo Ho Choi, I think it's in the UFC Hall of Fame. If it's not, it should be.
But I don't know. Who did you think won this fight? Honestly, I'm not even.
I'm in agreement that and then fans too will obviously because with a guy like Cub Swanson that is so well received by the fans and has obviously as much staying as he does in his UFC career, like a lot of people will call for that robbery call, but like that's the weird thing about the judging and why it can be so inconsistent. It's like, well, one fight they're either not factoring in enough, or another fight maybe they're factoring in a little too much. So maybe in this case it is like, yeah, okay, well, Andre was just better in the clinch, and so that's all it took. So in which case, like, it didn't really make that much of a difference for the fight. Now it did it, but that's sometimes like what I kind of like get on about with the judging and stuff. It's like you really just want that more consistency and stuff going forward, and not stuff that is straight up just like crazy that nobody really sees, and it's just like for the judges to for themselves to just I guess just like maybe talk about amongst themselves and then whatever, and then it just creates all this controversy for us to talk about. But the fight was close enough anyways, and Andre Fili is still a very game fighter, and that's someone that I still think like does there still is stuff out there for him, and he still obviously is still very capable of putting on very good fights like this one, to be honest. But it was still close enough. But I thought this Cub, especially for where he is at this point in his career, like still put on just a super good showing and should get more credit for that. And I hope that we're gonna still get to see him put on fights like this in the future. So
yeah, I don't think he's done yet. He is 40, which is nuts considering how good he still kind of looks in there when he gets in there. And I know Fili is like, I would say they're on a similar level, and plus they have like similar styles in a way too. The only thing with Cub is his footwork is so awkward, and that was honestly one of the things I thought Fili did really well, was cutting off the cage and not letting Cub use the footwork that he does in some of his fights. But before we move on to the next one, I want to leave it with this question. Who has better ink? And let us know what you guys think in the comments. Who has better ink? Andre Fili or Cub Swanson?
Well, I'll be honest, like, I've always thought Cub Swanson's had some of the best tattoos just like ever in UFC history.
That SoCal on the chest is iconic.
No, that guy absolutely does it right. It makes sense he would be from SoCal to get that kind of tattoos, to be honest. But
and Andre Fili, he kind of gives me that like motorcycle like look in a sense. Does that make any sense?
No, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like there's that movie The Bike Riders that I either just came out or that's coming out. Like I could see him in the cast of that. Like he would fit in there. And as for Cub Swanson, honestly, same thing at some points.
Yeah,
but
honestly.
I don't know. I like both of their ink. I'm going to go with Cub Swanson, though, too.
Yeah.
And the SoCal tattoo is the game changer for me. I think that's what puts it above. And anytime I talk about UFC fighters and tattoos, I think about Alan Belcher's Johnny Cash tattoo on his arm, which is still to this day maybe the worst tattoo I think I've seen in or outside the UFC.
Done some pretty bad tattoos, yeah.
Yeah. We can get it. This is like a whole other conversation. Like I know another tattoo that oh my God. Now I'm thinking of a bunch of them. So I'll tell you these two. One of them that I always thought was funny was like the two like Mickey Mouse gloves on Jamal Hill's chest, like doing the thumbs up. I always thought that was interesting. But then the other one, and I always used to make this joke when Daniel Rodriguez would fight. He has 1986 tattooed across his chest, which I think is the year he was born. And so I always say this, like, if he ever got like amnesia or anything, all he has to do is look in the mirror and see that 1986 on his chest and like, oh yeah, that's when I was born.
It's a bad tattoo, yeah.
I don't know. Is it bad though? It's pretty good if you lose your memory. Yeah, I don't know if you ever see the movie Memento. It's like the first movie that like really got Christopher Nolan on the map. And this guy, for those who haven't seen it, this guy basically has like amnesia. I forget like the exact. Oh my god, what is he trying to figure out? I have to talk about this now. This is so funny that we're actually talking. Yeah, so this guy basically he's trying to track down the dude who murdered his wife, but he has amnesia, so he basically just keeps tattooing different leads and clues to himself, so when he forgets, then he can look at the tattoos and he'll either remember fully or kind of remember. And so, yeah, so Daniel Rodriguez ever needs to remember what year he was born. Right there on the chest. You might want to move over this way, but you got the shot a little bit.
My bad.
But, oh my god, yeah. I had to bring that one up. I didn't think that's where the conversation was going to go. But we had to talk about D-Rod's tattoos.
See, we over here at the Her Handbook, we covered just about all this sphere, you know. So we had that talk about, you know, maybe some of the best tattoos, and so we went over to some of the worst as well.
Hey man, you said that, not me. Like I said, that 1986 me is that's a great one. But,
bad. Thumbs down.
Yeah, so we're gonna move on to the next fight that we want to talk about: Silva versus Charles Jourdain. And this is the first time Charles Jourdain has ever been knocked out, which I thought was actually crazy considering all the wars we've seen Jourdain in. But it just seemed like he struggled with Silva's footwork. He, kind of similar to Cub Swanson in the Fili fight. Silva did a good job at cutting off the cage, and I think the difference though is that he was really outstriking Charles Jourdain, and Jourdain was really going for that takedown. He could not get it until obviously the knockout happened, and Silva gets the win. What did you think of his performance? Because I was sleeping on this fight coming in. I didn't really think too much of it because there were a lot of good matchups on this card, but I was super impressed by Silva.
Yeah, I want to see more of this guy. I think he's honestly he's pretty entertaining. Like from the intro to the fight itself, and then afterwards with the interview as well. It's honestly a guy that I think the UFC is gonna want to look to showcase more. Maybe another candidate for the UFC Vegas 100 card, but I think it's like you just mentioned, for Charles Jourdain to get knocked out anyways is a crazy feat, and so this is the guy who accomplished it. And I think he's pretty entertaining, to be honest. I think I would want to see even see if he can keep ascending here. So
he did miss weight by a pound, but if it makes people feel better, the reasoning that he gave might be one of the best I think that I've ever heard. If it's true, that's insane. If it's false and he's lying, that's got to be the greatest story anyone could come up with to make up a reason to miss weight.
This is some of the funniest stuff I've ever heard.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, he said that he was trying to go downstairs to cut a little more weight, and I forget what he said he was carrying, but he fell down the stairs, hurt himself, and because of that, he said he couldn't cut any more weight. And like I said, if that's true, unreal. And if that's a lie, has to be one of the funniest excuses that anyone has ever come up with for missing weight. So it sucks that he did miss weight by a pound. You have to talk about it. It was an impressive win. But yeah, so hopefully he'll make weight in the next fight. He won't fall down the stairs.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's for sure. But shout out to him. That was a good win. I'm definitely excited to see more of him. And, to move on to the last fight that we really want to talk about, Peyton Talbott starched Giannis Ghemmouri with a clean 1-2, 19 seconds. Peyton Talbott, still undefeated, moves to 9-0. I have him kind of like in a similar league as like Shara Bullet. He clearly is an elite striker. Like, it doesn't matter the quality of opponent. You can just tell by the technique that he's something special on the feet. I think all that matters now is you just need to see him against better competition. And he called out Adrian Yanez, which is an amazing call out. I would love to see that fight. I do think he's ready for it, to be honest. But what do you think of Talbott in general? I know we've had conversations in the past thinking that he might be a little overhyped, but now in these past few fights, man, he's looked incredible. I'm all aboard.
Well, yeah, and like, so performances like this kind of keep reassuring like why even people like you and me would say that he does have that Sean O'Malley in him, where that striking like really is already so like so precise and is able to put away guys like it did here. Yeah, that's all you can ask for, is that he keeps that the rising because I think obviously at first, and even like the Sean O'Malley similarities where you put Sean O'Malley on the slower track, and so to protect him in that sense, and then now you get all the way to the point where O'Malley's the champ. But it's time for Peyton Talbott to that step up, like with Adrian Yanez is a good call out and a good
fun matchup, man.
Yeah, good, definitely good measuring stick. So
yeah, I think he'll be able to try and prove a lot if he gets that Yanez fight. I hope that the UFC considers it. But overall, man, just what an incredible card. Considering all of the craziness surrounding it, with all the fights that fell through, even on fight night, as we talked about before, the fact that it ended up being as great as it was, just amazing job by the UFC, honestly. And I'm stoked at what the result of that was. And man, so that'll be it for this podcast. It'll be coming out, I think it'll be out tomorrow, so July 2nd. So in 2 days, on July 4th, we got a special podcast for y'all, American Independence Day special, featuring the return of the Butcher, Sean Mullen, and also the return of THH Technical Director Jim for a fun July 4th pod. We talked some MMA, we had some laughs, that was a really good time, and definitely stay tuned for that, because it was one of the more fun podcasts, I'd say, that we've done in a bit. So besides that, the next UFC card is not next weekend, it's the weekend after. Rose Namajunas versus Tracy Cortez is headlining UFC Denver, so that's the next fight recap video that will be coming out. But like I said, in between then, stay tuned for the return of Sean Mullen and the return of Jim Pellegrino. That July 4th special is going to be a fun one, so definitely watch it. We'll see y'all.
Feel just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see